Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. It looks like we're missing one panelist, but if she joins on, that's okay, just to respect everyone's time. And we have 37 viewers right now, so I don't know if we have the record high of the day, but we're going to go ahead and get started. So I just want to thank you all for being here today and participating in this panel discussion as we discuss the future and the current state of political social work. You know, it was great to be able to have you all here because you all have different backgrounds and have contributed so much to not only the profession, but also just your communities as a whole and just as social workers in this arena. So I just want to thank you both for participating. And we're going to go ahead and get started. So we can start off with introductions. If you can just share your name, a little bit about your educational and professional background. We can start with that. So for starters, my name is Monika Soto. I am a 2021 CRISP Fellow. I graduated from the Columbia School of Social Work. And currently, I am a program manager at Prison Fellowship, which is a nonprofit that essentially focuses on justice that restores. So during my time at Columbia, I did concentrate in policy practice. So it's great to be here with you all. And Justin, I'll pass it over to you to share a little bit about your background first.
All right. Well, good to see you again. It's been a little while and glad to hear that you're doing such big things. I'm Justin Hodge. I'm a clinical assistant professor at the University of Michigan School of Social Work. I'm the faculty lead for our policy and political social work pathway, and I'm the director of our online certificate in political social work. When I'm not doing that, I'm also a Washtenaw County Commissioner. I was elected in 2022 to represent the 5th District. So if you know Michigan and Washtenaw County geography, good for you. If you don't, that is most of Ypsilanti Township and all of Augusta Township. I'm currently running for re-election. I actually just released all of my campaign, re-announced my relaunch video this morning. So we're getting that rolling now. And I'm currently the board president for CRISP.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that background. Suzanne, before you proceed, I see Kimberly Hardy, our third panelist, is here. Kimberly, if you can just share your camera, and that way we can see you on the panel. And you can go ahead, Suzanne, and let us know a little bit about yourself.
Sorry, Suzanne, but before you go, I think the issue is going to be that you can only have 5 people right now with how the room is set up. So that might be why Kimberly can't get in.
Oh, Anne or Christian, would you guys mind hopping off of the...
Yeah, I was wondering how I got on here anyways. I thought it's just, I'm like, sorry.
I think if you look on the top right corner, the red button that says leave will allow you to leave. And Christian Wallace, if you want to leave, you can as well. If not, it's okay. Oh, I see Kimberly now. Okay, great. So Suzanne, you can go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. And first, Justin, I saw your announcement this morning, so that's really exciting. Congratulations. So I am Suzanne Pritzker. I'm an associate professor at the University of Houston Graduate College of Social Work. I lead our political social work focused learning opportunity, and I also direct an immersive legislative internship program that we have. The Texas legislature meets on a biennial basis only for 140 days, so every other year. That's all despite the huge size of Texas. And so we have a group of students every session who go and just move to Austin, live in Austin, and work essentially around the clock in the Texas legislature. So I receive that program as well. And then in addition, much of my research focuses around civic engagement, barriers to civic engagement, around access to voting and other forms of civic engagement as well. And I'm really excited to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Kimberly, if you can go ahead and introduce yourself, that would be great. We're just doing introductions, a little bit about your professional or educational background just to start off.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm so sorry. I don't know why my camera isn't working. I'm going to figure it out. But in the meantime, I am Dr. Kimberly Hardy. I'm an assistant professor of social work at Fayetteville State University, one of the 17 UNC constituent institutions. And I'm also a former and now again, as of last Friday, candidate again for the North Carolina General Assembly for House District 43. I ran before in the last election cycle, and I've just put my hat back in the ring again on Friday. So super excited to join you, and we'll figure out this camera situation.
No worries. Thank you so much for joining us today. So my first question, and just for the flow of the panel, I'm going to pose a question and you can all answer the question. One person can answer. Feel free to answer as you see fit. And then we'll leave some time at the end for open Q&A for the students who are viewing the session. And I see we're up to 97 viewers now, so that's great. And so my first question is, so as we all know, social work is a clinically dominated profession. There aren't many schools of social work around the country that have like a policy-based program or really a program focused on social workers that are trying to participate in the political arena. So my question to you all is, what made you decide to get a social work degree, even though you wanted to be involved in the political arena?
I'll start. So it's really interesting. So my background is in clinical social work. So before I made this shift into academia and more policy and political focused social work, I was a practicing child and family therapist for several years. When I was going through the MSW program, or picking if I wanted to go to get a MSW or if I wanted to get a master's in public policy, what drew me to social work is the focus on social justice and that application across the spectrum of service delivery and just the ways in which we would engage with our clients. So knowing that I'd be able to get some amount of background and an approach to policy is what drew me to the field. And then what drew me back to the field was to try to help change social work education so it would be more focused on policy and political work.
That's awesome. And I actually didn't know that you started off your career clinically. So that's amazing to hear. And that actually puts a lot of things into perspective to show that just because you start off one way with your social work background doesn't mean you have to stay in a clinical space for the duration of your career.
So for me, I actually started out working in policy before I came to social work. I worked in the state of Virginia. I worked for the Virginia Secretary of Education's office and then for the Virginia legislature. And really, I was interested in policy. I was interested in changing policies, being a part of influencing, shaping policy. And I found myself in those spaces really increasingly frustrated by whose voices were heard in the policymaking process and whose voices weren't. And I had a colleague, I was working at the time for the Virginia the Senate Finance Committee, and I had a colleague who was a social worker. And I remember going to lunch with him and talking about like all the sort of structural challenges and the problems with policy and again, just sort of exclusion of really critical perspectives in the policymaking process. And he said, you need to go talk to my professor. And he connected me with a professor named Bob Schneider at Virginia Commonwealth University, who has since passed away, but was at the time actually had founded a group called Influencing State Policy, which is a national policy organization that really was about connecting policy and practice in social work and bridging clinical and policy work and really helping to make those connections. And I went to talk to him, not really knowing anything about social work other than it being a clinical focused profession. And he really opened my eyes to the ways to the connection between social work and policy. And really, as we talked about my interests and my wanting to see sort of a different policy making arena, that's where really the connection between social work came through. And he talked about the history of social work and the ways in which both our political social work, our community organizing roots, and the kinds of influence in really supporting different policy making structures and different voices in the policy arena was really critical to social work. And so that's how I got to social work. And I'm really grateful for that connection, that opportunity, and then really seeing the space and the ways that social workers really can change policy, can change politics, can really be critical voices in the policy process.
I have still not been able to figure out this camera situation, but nevertheless, I think what got me, I've kind of always been political. I'm from the DC, Maryland area, born in DC, raised in Maryland. And so you can't be that close to the seat of political power and it not rub off on you a little bit. But I started out my practice career as a school social worker, which actually helps you understand how the challenges that your clients and their families are facing are usually because of some sort of malignant neglect of the communities that they live in. And so once you start seeing that the faces of your clients change, but the problems that they're facing don't, you start to recognize that you have to do something much more meso and macro. And so I think that's honestly, I've always sort of understood that to be the evolutionary progress of social workers individually. Like you start out understanding the impact of things on clients' lives as a practitioner, but then you eventually start to recognize that that knowledge will help you inform change at the community level and the policy level. And so I'm always a huge fan of those of us who were practitioners going into a political space later on, because we're taking the stories and lived experiences of our clients with us. My social work program, my baccalaureate degree and my doctorate are both from Morgan State University, my beloved alma mater. And when I was there, Morgan has been designated by the state of Maryland as the state's urban university. And so everything that we focus on is like, because you kind of can't talk about urban spaces and poverty without talking about politics and things like that. So it's kind of always been in my spirit. I knew eventually I would do something, but I didn't know it would be in the state of the never-ending gerrymander that I would actually decide to do this. So, but all the more reason why I need to do it. The state needs it. We only have 2 social workers in our state legislature here, one in the House and one in the Senate. And that's completely unfortunate. And I've been trying to teach my students for the longest time that if you really want to help people, like they always tell me they do, and in response to the why do you want to be a social worker question, I'm like, well, then you need to help them on a larger scale, because so much of what you're going to work with them at the micro level is caused by what's happening to them because of oppressive sources of, forces around them. And so I ask them all the time, like, at what point do we stop saying that someone's mental health, for example, is the issue, and instead look at how it is caused or exacerbated by the environment that they're in, and that includes the political environment. So that's my part about what got me here.
Yeah, absolutely. You are adding such valuable pieces to this conversation. And Dr. Hardy, I see you're getting a lot of HBCU love in the comments, a lot of Morgan State alum. So shout out to Morgan State and all the students that are here and present. And so I guess that leads me into my next question. Since you all have worked in policy and politics in different capacities, what do you think separates the social workers in government from those who pursue traditional like MPP degrees, like public policy degrees, political science degrees? Like, what do you think separates us social workers in these spaces from those who are also in these spaces but have a more traditional, they pursue these degrees that are more, just policy focused and just, the political science degrees, and those that people think are the only way to entering into this space when we know that's not true?
I'll go ahead and start. And I think, Kimberly, if you haven't clicked the gear icon at the bottom of the screen, you have to select the camera. That might help.
I tried it twice, Justin. It's driving me crazy. But while you're speaking, I'm going to try again.
Give it a shot. Give it a shot. And I don't know what's going on because now we got more panelists than 5. So it's wild. But, we're going to keep hopping and popping.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on, but we'll go with the flow. It's okay.
We're going to go with the flow. So to your question, this is something that I talk about explicitly a lot in my policy analysis course when it comes down to figuring out what are the metrics a student is going to use to decide whether or not a policy is good or bad or something that we should trying to pursue. And a lot of that is going to come down to a social worker or a social work student's perspective is going to be one that is hopefully much more rooted in social justice and promoting equity than someone in another profession that's policy focused and doing that kind of work. And I think we see the same kind of thing when we see social workers that are explicitly engaged in politics. You're going to be coming, if you're following our code of ethics and are trained well, you're going to be approaching this work with an eye for helping the most marginalized in our society, and hopefully are in this work for the right reasons. That's not necessarily something that I think we can say from everybody, regardless of your training. And we do see some social workers too that aren't doing, things the way that we would like to be seeing them. Shout out to Kirsten Cinema. But there's a lot of that. Like on average, I think most social workers are going to be in this work and are going to be doing it with an eye towards promoting social justice and equity.
Absolutely. Suzanne, did you want to add anything? I didn't want to cut you off, but I agree with everything you said, Justin.
To say that's actually where I was going to start is right that not just being a social worker doesn't necessarily achieve everything that I think we hope to with our code of ethics and our focus on social justice, achieving social justice calls for. That being said, I think this is something. So I mentioned at the beginning our legislative internship program, and we've had one legislature in Texas who is really deeply invested in this program, has supported the program for 15, 20 years, and he talks about why social workers. And he is not a social worker. That is not his background, but he pretty much exclusively supports our program and brings social workers in. And he talks about consistently how different our students and then our alums analyze policy, think about policy, really that the MPPs and the JDs and the other degrees do good policy analysis work, but the really connecting the day-to-day direct impacts on people, really understanding and asking the questions. Yeah, this looks good on paper, but then what? What happens? What does this look like? How will this play out in people's lives? How will this impact folks that are already marginalized in so many different ways by our structures and our systems? And I think that's what we bring, is we bring the ability, people have said this in the chat, the person and environment, but really bringing through just being able to think so, I think, more critically about really what does it look like when we have propose these policies, when we consider these policies. And I think that I've seen it time and time again. We ask different questions. We consider policy differently. We bring a really, I think, critical lens for the real life impacts of policy.
I made it work. My motto is I refuse to be defeated by anything without a brain, which includes the Republicans. But having said that, I can't say anything more than Suzanne and Justin said about all of this, because there's a rationale behind why we get into social work in the first place. And that's people. Like, legitimately every semester, every single student says, I want to be a social worker because I want to help people. And so I think when you go into a profession where that is your foundational goal, then whatever else you do with that social work background, it is informed by that. And I'm not suggesting that people who are poli-sci or JDs don't also have that same compassion. Like I said, one of our state senator social worker, Sydney Batch. She's an MSW JD. And she does child welfare and family law. So there's definitely that piece there, but it is important to note she got the MSW first. So the social work piece is what drives us, and we just bring that into anything that we do. And I think that people-centric focus is what makes us really good at this work.
I want to add to that, just to riff off of what Kimberly and Suzanne are saying here. And this is something that I tell my students all the time, is that I think having a social work degree or social work training makes you the most qualified to run for elected office, because there's not another profession that trains you across the whole spectrum of the kind of work that you're going to be doing. Like when I think about the skills that I would love for, my students are co-signing in there. He says it all the time. When I'm thinking about the kinds of skills that I would like for an elected official to have: interpersonal skills, community organizing skills, the ability to look at policy and politics, to be able to manage human services, to be able to do program evaluation. I mean, I challenge you to name another profession that trains professionals to do all of those things. There's not another one, but we do all of that with social justice as the focus. And that's what differentiates people in our profession that are doing this kind of work from people in other professions. And as it's already been said, we have this perspective of, if we do policy X, we'll also be able to understand what that's going to look like on the ground for people as they experience that policy. And you can't really say that about any other profession.
Can I jump in real quick?
No,
just
please,
because I want to respond to a question.
No, yes, absolutely. Go ahead.
Sorry. So Danielle asked in the chat, were social workers involved in the Texas anti-trans legislation? And I just, because I think that relates directly to this question, I want to say no. It's actually a directive from the governor in Texas, but just today, I've been in conversations. So our students at the social work students at the Graduate College of Social Work have started a petition related to this legislation. They're organizing and passing that petition around to try to push back on the directive. And our NASW Texas is testifying tomorrow at a Department of Family and Protective Services hearing tomorrow about against this legislation. Talking with a student right now, or not right now, but I'm meeting with a student tonight who is planning to testify tomorrow. So I think that actually speaks to, right, and as each of them is working on what they're saying, what's in the petition, what's in the testimony, it really is about the direct impact, what this directive is doing, the direct impacts it's going to have both on the trans youth and on their families and on the social workers who are being mandated who are being told by this policy to act in ways that are contrary to our code of ethics. And I think that's an example of the ways that why social workers are so critical in the policy-making process.
Monika, can I say one thing? Because I want to riff off of Suzanne's thing just now, because she talked about other things that social workers are doing in a political space that isn't just running for office. And so that's a thing that I think we miss this sometimes. Yes, please run for office, because we definitely need more people in the room where it happens, right? But we also need you to be testifying before city council, state legislature, Congress, whatever, county commission, whatever it is, the school board, and do all the things, right? Be a poll worker, register vote. Like, you have to be a part of the entire process, because there's a role for everybody. This is a big, crazy, audacious thing to run for office. It is mind-numbingly crazy to do it, but it's also incredibly important that we do it. But it's not, everybody doesn't have to do that. There is some role in the political space for social workers along that entire continuum. And so when you talked about that just now, Suzanne, the student who is planning to testify, one of my former students here, he's an alum here, but he's working on his PhD at Houston, and his MSW internship was in the Texas legislature while he was down there. And so that was, it was an incredible experience for him, but there's something that every one of us can do in the political space to advocate for our clients at the policy level.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for bringing that up, because I remember sitting in, the seat watching this panel last year in this event. And I felt like, okay, maybe I'm going to run for office. Like, this may be the highest level of impact. This is where I can achieve the things I want to achieve for my community. And then I ended up, that ended up not happening when I graduated from Columbia. I actually ended up working in nonprofit spaces, but working on the policy teams. And I find that, with my social work background, it's been incredibly helpful, because I noticed that even when I'm having certain conversations, and just my advocacy is different than those with, that have different experiences and so forth. So thank you so much for bringing that up. That though, more power to you. If you want to run for office, we are here for you. We will support you, and we completely encourage that. But that's not necessarily the only way in which you can be an effective social worker and an effective leader within like this political space and the policy arena. And just a note for everyone in the chat, it's a little bit difficult to scroll up and see all of the questions because there's so many comments, which is amazing. I love this engagement. But if there's any specific question you want me to pose to the panelists, feel free to drop it in the Q&A bucket. That way I can easily go back to those and I don't miss your comment.
Well, before you ask another question, I hope you have moved from maybe you'll run to it's more of a question of when. I know you're doing great work now, but let's still, keep thinking about that.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely not abandoning the idea. But since you brought that up, I'm going to pose a question back to you. How do you feel like your social work background equipped you to run a successful campaign, become an elected official, and now rerun? Like, what types of not only just support and resources, but background knowledge do you feel like the social work profession provided for you to be able to see that through?
Yeah, I'll answer that. But first, I'm going to say we've got more than 100. We're at 112 people in here, so this is the
most
panel where it's happening now, right? I know. Let's get those last 60 or so people in here and just have everybody.
Right?
So I would think a large part of my social work background that's been particularly helpful in serving in office, and then hopefully what will help me win re-election, is my skills around conflict resolution. I mean, so much of what you do in politics is just it's conflict. I mean, we talked about this on the panel yesterday, that we can't shy away from conversations about power and conflict, because that's what politics is about. It's about, you have the battle of ideas, and with a little sprinkle of misinformation. No, I cut out. Am I back?
Yeah, Hello?
I'm back.
Okay, I can hear you. Yeah, your video's freezing, but
maybe
it's okay.
Maybe we have too many people in the room. Maybe that's what's making it go a little wild.
It's the overwhelming
influx of I don't know at what point I cut out, but I was saying the conflict resolution skills have been what's really helped me. I think been really key in I think what has been a successful first term for me. And something I often tell my students is that the skills around being successful at campaigning are in many ways different than the skills that make you successbut at governing. And you've got to be able to do both of those things really effectively. I think frequently we get people in office that are really good at the campaigning piece, but less good at the governing piece. And that's something I would say watch out for when you're evaluating a candidate. I think all the social work skills that we get trained in are very, very helpful in the governing piece, particularly as you have to regularly have conversations with people who have different ideas and who may disagree with you, and figuring out how to be persuasive or how to understand something from someone else's perspective to be able to have a conversation. That's all incredibly valuable. And that's different than what a campaign might look like.
Right. Absolutely. Dr. Hardy, did you want to add anything to that question?
Yeah. So unfortunately, because I live in North Carolina, I was not elected in my run last time. Neither were about 18 other phenomenal Black women who ran. And I hope there's a point at which we start talking about that piece too. And if not, I'll just throw it in there now. We need more women, and we need more women of color. But there were so many phenomenal women who were running, so many amazing Democrats, period, who were running. In case that hasn't been made clear, I'm a cobalt blue, dyed in the wool Democrat. And so, we all kind of lost. They drew the lines crazy. Turnout wasn't great. And so, we all kind of had to go home and lick our wounds. But most of us have come back either as candidates or having started new organizations and stuff. Like my very, very dear friend, Dr. Amy Steele, she ran in Cabarrus County out towards Charlotte, and decided that after 2 times of not getting elected, that was not the way she was going to make a change. And so she started the new North Carolina project. And I'm actually the C4 board chair of that for about another day or two, because then I have to step down because of the candidacy. And then 2 friends who were running for U.S. House and State Senate, they didn't get elected either. And so they started the new rural project, which is vitally important. We don't spend nearly enough time talking about the rural spaces of the country around electoral politics. But, that is, but you're right. The things that you need to be a good candidate, and I agree with you on that, Justin, to also be someone who governs well, who leads. I mean, I think it's important no matter what space you're in, right? Is the ability to listen to people and do it so that they know that they've been heard, to understand if they can't put it into the prettiest words, to understand what it is that they're expressing as their needs, and to have the compassion to want to help them solve those problems. And then, to have the skill set. I mean, I think one of the best things in the world when I was on the campaign trail last time was my ability to broker, because you would meet people on the campaign trail who would say, well, can you help me with this? Do you know where I should go for that? And because I'm already a social worker at a university engaged in our field program, I know the agencies that I can connect them to. So you're actually helping them before you're even elected. So if you have all of that social work background, you bring it to bear on the campaign trail and in the elected office that you have. So I don't know, I just think, and we're great communicators. I think we're very good at being able to translate. And that's not always a thing that can happen, especially from the professoriate. I can speak to that for sure, that you can't always translate these fancy idealistic things into what they call kitchen table issues. But I think social workers are very good at that. So that's what I would add to that piece.
Yeah, thank you so much for your input. And I had this question already, like that I wanted to ask you all, but I see it's come up several times in the chat and Q&A. The students on the call really want to hear some advice from you all. You all have amazing experience in so many different capacities as professionals, professors, elected officials. What is, maybe not just one piece of advice, but what is some advice you would give a young social worker or just a student who is maybe wants to make the transition into political social work, who is just getting ready to join the workforce or make a transition into this arena?
Okay, I'll tackle it. One thing I would say is join a campaign. There's so much that you can learn about the political process and how it works, how the sausage is made, right? By joining a candidate's campaign. It really doesn't even, you can be part of the field operations team that goes out and canvasses and knocks on doors and puts together events for candidates. You can be part of their comms team so that you're, doing the communication outreach to them. Particularly, I promise you, my campaign Instagram account would have been a dumpster fire if not for the intern that I had, because I am all Twitter and Facebook, and I am all thumbs when it comes to Instagram. She had to show me how to post a video. I was like, I don't know. So if you have a communication skill set, if you're good and savvy at social media, do that. If you want to, just being a volunteer on a campaign or a paid staffer, if the campaign has enough money to afford you, that is a really good way to start networking and knowing who the players are, what the issues are, and really vetting candidates. I will say I had a lot of students that were very anti-political. It doesn't matter anyway. You know, what's one vote gonna, my one vote gonna make a difference, and all that. And they always had these negative viewpoints about candidates. And then I ran, and I was like, "Do you think those things about me?" And they were like, "No." I'm like, "Well, then now you know somebody, right?" And so now you know that isn't true. That everybody isn't shady, and everybody isn't just out for self, kind of thing. So join a campaign and get to know candidates, because candidates hang out with other candidates, and then they become electeds who hang out with other electeds, and then you never know, you could end up being a staffer for them once they get elected or something, or they can help you pursue your own piece. So that'll be, I guess, my first piece, and then I'll turn it over to Justin and Suzanne for more. Join a campaign.
So something I was going to say is, I think, find others. It's sometimes, you know, if you're not at a program where there's a lot of other folks doing political social work or doing policy work, it can feel like, how do I fit in social work? How do I do this? How do I enter into this? And I think the network, you know, Kimberly talked about the network on campaigns. I think the network of social workers, like if you're here and in a program without other folks, look at the names of people chatting at the same time, like look them up on social media, find them, connect, reach out to folks in the panel, reach out to other people who have talked today. There's very much, I think, within the world of people in social work involved in politics and policy. We just want to help each other because we want folks to have space to get involved in this. So I think it's really helpful to feel like you're not alone in doing it and in charting this path, and to find that support and the mentorship and the networking that can come. But I think also, kind of building off what Kimberly talked about with campaigns, I think also kind of anywhere you can just step in and take a risk and try something. You see an issue coming up before your local county or city government, go and testify. And it's scary, but bring your friends, bring other folks, have a group of people come with you and try it. Right now, still in some places we can do it virtually, so you can do it from the comfort of home and feel a little more kind of in your safe space to do that if you want. Go and register voters, and again, like, do that with other folks besides you, because I think that a lot of times it's doing the first act that is really the most intimidating for folks. I see that with students in my class all the time. It's like, how do I don't know how, I don't know if I can, I don't know if it's for me. And then when they go and they, you know, go with somebody in your class, go with, you know, a friend that you were in the program with, and they go and they do, you know, the voter registration, or they go and you know, make a phone call to an elected official for the first time. I think I've seen over and over again the sort of confidence and excitement that comes from that, from being part of that. And so I just encourage, take the first step and do it alongside other folks too, to help kind of open the door into getting involved.
So I agree with everything that's already been said. What I would add to it is, just know now that you are already qualified to do it. So don't feel like you got to go do some other thing before you can go make the first step. Go do it now. And as part of that, and taking that first step, I'd say about probably 90, maybe this is a little generous, but like 90+% of politics is just showing up. And frequently we see the people that are probably going to do a really poor job, but they're real good at showing up. So start showing up to things, show up to, I'm always trying to encourage my students to get engaged with local political parties. So whatever your political party of choice is, and depending on your state, there's usually, people are familiar at the national level, like the DNC and RNC, when you have the big conventions, but there are state political parties at that level, congressional district, at the county level. And in Michigan, the Democratic Party hasn't even at the local level, like township or city level. So get involved in that, because that's a great way to make connections with elected officials or other people that are just involved in that work locally, and show up. Because if you show up, you're being seen, and then people think of you for opportunities that may pop up. Look at local boards and commissions through your local government. I'm a big fan of local government. That's why I'm county commissioner. So look at getting appointed to boards and commissions at that local level. You know, people tend to be familiar with federal government and know that Congress people and people at the state level serve on a bunch of different committees. At the local level, we have that too, except the difference typically is that committees are made up of a bunch of residents that have an expertise in a topic area, and then they're there to advise the local elected officials on a thing. That's how I got a lot of my experience early on. So I would say show up in those spaces, and it'll help you get more experience. And you're going to be uncomfortable. Like Suzanne said, you're going to be uncomfortable in those spaces. That's fine. Sit in that uncomfortableness, and then it'll go away eventually. Or you'll be able to just deal with it a little bit better. But just show up and just take that first step, like Suzanne said.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for touching on different ways in which they can pursue opportunities, because there were several questions like, what types of job titles should I be searching out for? What are some behind the scenes jobs that I can look out for to know what, like, you know, how I can get involved and essentially get hired in a place where I can be a social worker in policy, in politics, in government.
I think one of the things I would also recommend is there are affiliate groups of different political organizations. Here in North Carolina, we have 100 counties. And so there's a Democratic Women chapter across in every county, and then the Democratic Women of North Carolina. And I'm on, well, again, temporarily now, but on both of those. And so, but then there's Democratic Men, there's Senior Dems, there's Young Dems, there's all these different groups. And then we have our own Indivisible chapter here. It's called Cape Fear Indivisible, very progressive group. There's a bunch of local things. And one of the young men who is very, very vocal and active in Indivisible started out just sort of being a rabble rouser in his own right, showing up at the rallies that the other groups were sponsoring. So then he got pulled into the party and became a member of Indivisible. And now he's on the ballot for running for, I want to say, for Fayetteville City Council. And I mean, and everybody knows him. You can just say, oh, Mario, like everybody knows him across the whole of the county because he's always there. He's at city council meetings. If there's an issue that comes up, he puts his name on the little list and he gets up there and he does his 2 to 3 minute spiel to rage against the machine. And he's a wonderful young man who's going to be an amazing elected official for the city. So, and all that just came from, there was a rally, he showed up, he just kept showing up, and then he connected to the group that was doing the rallies. And now he, a few years later, he's on the ballot. So, and I absolutely co-sign Justin's point about you're already exactly as qualified as you need to be. I will say that when I ran the last time, there were a couple of seasoned veteran women legislators in the State House that pulled a bunch of us candidates together, and they gave us these 8 tips to get through. And 2 of them have always stuck with me. One of them is they need you in the people who are waiting for your voice need you in the race. Like if you're not there, for some of them, that voice doesn't get heard in spaces where it needs to be heard. And so it's vital that you're there. And the other part was you only need to be 51% brave. You don't need to be 100% brave. You just need to be just more than 50% brave enough to step out there, and it will find you. The moment will find you.
Yeah, and I definitely encourage you all to network, share your LinkedIns with each other, join the networking room, because don't take for granted being in this space right here with so many like-minded individuals, whether they be students, professionals, professors, elected officials, and so forth. Like there's so much there's so many people to connect with just right here, like just being here today. So definitely that for some people, that may be the first step, like just connecting with 5 people and going from there. So there is one question in the chat that I would like your opinion on, and it's, does your political view or your work in politics ever affect your social work ethics? No, that's a hard no.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think we get into this to express our social work ethics and values. So that has not gotten in the way for me. Might want to ask Kirsten Cinema though.
I would say though, I think it depends on what we mean by that question. Because I think one of the hard parts about being involved in policy making is that there really are tensions between our ethics sometimes. So I think like not getting away from the overall ethic of working towards social justice, really concerned for, you know, all the things that we I think ascribe to as social workers, but more the tensions between the different ethics. Like at what point, you know, are you willing to sacrifice your integrity in order to further social justice goals? Are you willing to, you know, do a backroom deal to further a social justice end, for example, where people don't know what's going on? I think we see, you know, I think those are the kinds of tensions that happen where actually our ethics are in conflict with each other, and figuring out how do we navigate that can be really difficult in political spaces. And I don't know, you know, Justin or Kimberly, to what extent y'all experience, you know, have struggled with any of that, but that's something I hear a lot in particularly, well, I've experienced myself, but also hear a lot from our students who are engaged, in our alumni who are engaged, like in the Texas legislature, for example. Like the ways you kill bad legislation are sometimes to do some trades in the background that you wouldn't ordinarily want to do. And like, you know, you're put in these positions where you have to make these hard choices that sometimes really do kind of put our ethics in conflict with each other, if that makes sense. And I think that can be, that is a challenge that I see social workers have to navigate a lot, at least in our state.
Yeah, I mean, I'll get on that one because that's a good way to frame it, in that you sometimes are going to come into situations where, because compromise is always tough, particularly when you're in a situation where you're probably going to have to either get a thing or give up a thing that you don't really want. But what do you do to be able to get the thing that you do want, or that you do think is going to be particularly helpful? I think I had somewhat of an experience like this as we were working through figuring out our first allocation of the American Rescue Plan dollars. So that our county got about $71 million for the American Rescue Plan, and we've gone through this process of allocating it in what we're calling the Washtenaw Rescue Plan. So we've done that in a couple of packages so far, and then we still have funding to probably do a few more packages. In the first package, there was a lot of debate about what are we going to include in this package, because it's whatever is in here is going to set the tone for what people can expect us to be doing, and it's also going to say, hey, the board values this particular item or these particular items that are in there. There was a majority of commissioners that were prepared to shell out a good chunk of the money on making sure that we expanded broadband access across the entire county, because there were pockets of the county that didn't have access to the infrastructure to connect to broadband. And it's also something that the county has been trying to work through for the last couple of decades. And we had convened a task force. Task force had come up with recommendations. It seemed like perfectly timed with the money that was coming in. But that didn't really, that wasn't the primary thing that people in my district needed support on. So me and a couple of the other commissioners had to really navigate, like, there's going to be the votes for this thing to happen in the first package anyway. How should we go about making sure that components that would really help our districts get into the first package? So then that part was a bit of a challenge. And that was probably one of the tougher negotiations that I've had so far. And then, a lot of people were still unhappy with it. I think there were a lot of really good things that I was able to negotiate into that package, such as starting a countywide children's savings accounts program. We got money for childcare in there. Work to help weatherize homes, lots of stuff. And I'm going to release another video about that soon too. So if you follow me on social media, you'll see all that. But and the broadband piece also helped some people in my district, but that was a tough one. And there was a lot of tense negotiations between commissioners during that period. And I had to really decide, do I publicly try to speak against this if we only include this one item, even though it would pass anyway, or do I work effectively to get other components in it that would be helpful, even though people were still going to be unhappy? And I got and continue to get a lot of attacks for how that deal went down, because a lot of the other components that got added to it, people just aren't getting the same kind of recognition as that other piece.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And so I have another question for you, Justin, and then I'm going to ask a question to Suzanne and Kimberly. But my question for you, Justin, is from the perspective of time and scheduling, how feasible is it to hold elected office, like hold a position, and perform well in a second or third occupation?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I'm struggling. It's a time management battle frequently in figuring out how to do it because I haven't reduced any of my responsibilities at the university yet. I'm trying to decide if I have to do that or not. But I don't want to have less than 100% of my salary because you don't get paid a lot to be county commissioner. So I need to have my other job. So it is, what I tell everybody is one of the most important skills to develop is good time management skills. And making sure that you're blocking off time for yourself in your schedule just to make sure. And that's something I've gotten much better at over the last several months. I think shortly after I took office, every meeting anybody needed to have, I'm having it. And then I'm grading papers or doing all the school stuff on the weekends. And it's like, well, then where am I going to do anything else? So now I'm much better about blocking off time to like go to the gym. And it's like, that's the gym time. All right.
Right.
Nothing else is getting in there. Sorry. And then sometimes it takes a little, and this might be why some people have a hard time scheduling things with elected officials and why it takes weeks to do it, because there's always a meeting to have or some kind of work to be done. So it is, it also depends on how much you commit to the work. A lot of people talk about there being like full-time elected offices and part-time elected offices. And really, I think any elected office, you could commit a full-time amount of time to it. Really what people are talking about is, does it pay you enough money to be able to do that as your only job or not? And most of the local offices are not a full-time kind of thing. So navigating how much time you're committing to it is important. And then there are other dynamics that you have to consider as well. So I'm in board leadership, which means there are 4 commissioners. There's 9 commissioners for the county, and 4 of us are in a leadership position. So there's the chair of the board, the vice chair, there's the chair of working session, which is me, and then there's a vice chair of working session. Being in some of those leadership positions is a significant the bigger time commitment. So the commissioners that are not in a leadership position, it's much less time. So if I was not in a leadership position, I probably wouldn't struggle as much with figuring out how to fit everything into the time space of it. So that's something else to consider. Even after you get into office, then there's the leadership role. And do you take a leadership role if you can get the votes among your colleagues to do that? So a lot to consider.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for sharing about that. Now, my question that I'm going to pose to Suzanne and Kimberly is, so this is a question that came in from an attendee. For the women involved, what are ways you overcome the dynamics of a male-dominated environment, especially early on as you're getting used to that uncomfortableness mentioned earlier?
I wish I wasn't muted when I just did that. I said, So, well, first of all, some of that is just being a woman on earth, right? Like, I mean, in many instances, I'm in the academy and it's dominated by men in the leadership spaces anyway, which is its own kettle of fish. But I do remember that when I was in my primary, so I had a primary last time I ran. I have it again this time. And basically, for anyone outside, who doesn't get the vernacular, a primary is when we're battling within the party to see who's going to be the candidate to battle the other guy, right? And so I battled a 6-term incumbent. He'd been there for 12 years. Did really not do much, and so beat him on his lack of voting record, or when he did vote, it was really controversial, terrible votes. And so, like HB2, if anybody's ever heard of North Carolina's HB2 bill, which is the trans bathroom bill, which is disgusting, he voted in support of that. But there were other horrible things that are still in that bill, but I'll fix that when I get to Raleigh in November. So, I remember being on the primary trail. And we were out at early vote and we were passing out, palm cards, the little shiny, colorful things with our faces. And one of my students was there volunteering on the campaign, and she passed it out. And a guy said, "Come on, girl, politics is men's business." And we were like, "Oh my God, I cannot even believe what year is this that we're in that you just said that with a straight face." So some of that is just going to be there. When I beat the incumbent in the primary, a mutual friend confided that he said, "I never thought a woman would be able to beat me." And so he's one of the ones in my primary again. And I have a 100% track record of beating him now. So I don't intend to have that go away. So, like I said, I'm not going to be defeated by someone without a brain. So at the end of the day, you gotta know that you have value to bring to whatever space that you're in, political space, clinical space, whatever it is that you're going to do. And that anybody's issues around your gender, that's a them issue, and let them go work that out. We believe in client self-determination, right? Let them go work out their issues with your gender, but don't you let that be a thing that bothers you. And then you just have to have, because even when I got the t-shirts made, we had a local vendor, and my campaign manager had been the one working with him on the whole, design and everything. So I went with him to go pick them up, and I'm all excited to see the shirt. And the vendor says to my campaign manager, "Oh, who's that? That's you?" And I was like, "Oh my God." I said, "I'm the one whose name is on the shirt. Thank you." And so he was like, "Oh, okay." And so he saw one of my palm cards, and he was like, "Well, why you should have had your hair up, in the picture, and you should have worn glasses, and that way they'll know you mean business when you get." I said, "If you don't give me these shirts and get on somewhere talking to me crazy, I took my shirt, I left my CM to deal with the rest of it." And I was like, "Ain't nobody got time." And then that's when you need to have what we call in the political space the kitchen cabinet, right? Like, this is the people that you can say anything to, and it's not going to wind up in the press the next day. And so you just sometimes have to be, you have to yell and say unladylike things, in private, so that when you go back into the world, you're ready to deal with the nonsense. But again, that is their issue. And, I'm not getting ready to be bothered with their issues. So I hope that's not an overly simplistic thing to say, but because patriarchal structures exist in every aspect of our society, I think there's just, on some level, how have you negotiated it thus far? Continue to do it that way.
Everything Kimberly said, I think that captures it all. The only thing that I would add is just, there's research showing that women are less likely to run for office when asked, right? Women don't see themselves as candidates the ways that men do. Women, we're less likely to see ourselves in spaces where a man who is not qualified to run will be like, "Yeah, I'll run," right? And then a woman with all the qualifications, all the reasons to run, all the experience, all the, professional and lived experiences will hesitate. "Well, not me, not right now. I'm not sure I'm the best fit." And I think that it's really important for us to be aware of that and to really think about our own reactions, but also to boost each other up. And I think that to make sure that we're asking, that women, we're asking each other, that we're seeing that, we're recognizing and the strengths that each other bring, and really helping to sort of reinforce that, right? Exactly what Kimberly put in the chat too, that women have to be asked 7 times. So ask those times, but also, if you're the one being asked, don't say no. I think that's really important.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I know we're basically at time now, and I'm sorry if I didn't get to your question. There's so many questions in the chat, but this is great. And I just want to thank you all so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules. So I know you all are so busy to just be here and talk to the students that participated in this day, this advocacy day. Like I said, feel free to connect with each other on LinkedIn. Everyone who's in the chat, connect with your peers, connect with the professionals that you're meeting and hearing from throughout the day. Definitely make the most of the experience because surely enough, you'll be like me where in one moment I'm sitting as an attendee, as a student, and then I blink and now I'm working. So it just comes at you so fast. But I just want to thank you all so much for contributing to such a meaningful conversation. And yeah, thank you all.